This past week, we ran a wild experiment. We let Claude talk or interview the demographic it was building a product for. It just interviewed people on what it had built, got validation on what was working and what wasn't, used that as the basis for the next phase of the build, and it was in that loop for days. And so let me give you some context so you have a full appreciation of what's happening here. We run a product called Dialogue. This isn't meant to be an advert. This is simply context that's needed to understand. It basically allows teams to conduct automated interviews with stakeholders, with customers, with ideal customer profiles, basically anyone relevant to a product. You can interview them at massive scale and turn all of that into useful analysis. And in this case, a context layer that agents can use to build and to ground their building decisions. So this creates a feedback loop that sits between the AI that's building and the humans that have the actual problem. And so this interview, analyze, build, interview, ship loop is something that just went on in perpetuity for multiple days. And if you've been living under a rock, or you're just a well-adjusted human, you may not have heard of the Ralph Wiggum loop, which is something that is popped up as a popular new methodology. And all that is simply what happens when you put Claude into a loop where it cannot exit that loop until it's done with a giant to-do list or a PRD. And these things, can run for hours or for days. And the problem that we had with that is, much like the character Ralph from The Simpsons, it can be quite dumb at times. It can drift off into weird areas. It can just do the typical AI thing. It begins to be an AI smell to it. And so we wanted to course correct that to the best of our ability by letting it ground what it's done frequently against the customer profile that it's trying to solve for. So this is how the project was set up. We first had discovery. And again, we did not give a solution or a product for Claude to build. We simply gave it a problem space and the demographic that we think has this problem. And we said, just go talk to them, go interview them to understand this problem at a deeper, at a richer level, and build some context layer around what this problem is, how people talk about it, the words they use, what solutions they are trying to use currently, things like that. And then once it had that context layer, once it had those insights, it decided it found something to build, and it built the MVP. But here's where it gets interesting. What it did next is we gave it the tools to deploy that MVP, to put that on a unique URL, and then go back and interview that same profile to say, hey, have I solved this problem? Is this something that looks like you'd want it? It did a thorough analysis. It's another thorough interview on why or why not this was it. And it then made corrections. It made updates. It added new features. It changed features. And one of the coolest things is that the messaging, the actual language, which is usually a little bit of AI slop, was actually really well calibrated against what people had said, how they described things. And it was very careful to put the front and center, the themes that kept coming up. And so, as you can imagine, this loop just happened over and over. Build, measure, learn. And I think this matters a lot because we're so used, especially if you're an early stage builder, you have very little access to people that you're building for. And live interviews, just talking to your customer profile, is honestly the best thing that you can do. Any great product person will tell you that that needs to be a key part of your loop. But typically engineers want to avoid that at all costs. They want to stay in the IDE, they want to stay in the terminal, and we don't blame it, we understand it. But watching this play out, where every feature decision was rooted in real customer context that was recent, was pretty amazing. So let's talk about what was investigated. We asked people about side hustles, or to be more precise, Claude and Dialogue asked people about side hustles. They asked them about the problems they have with them, the things that they have learned over time to be aware of, how they solve for it currently, and what they just feel like have become red flags, and really just how they speak about it, where they're positive, where they're negative. And this high level problem discovery conversation was what spawned everything. So what was discovered in this was really interesting. You'll see it reflected here on the landing page that it built, is that people over time got very suspicious, and that if they couldn't immediately understand the drawbacks or the cons of the side job, that they were almost, it just felt too good to be true. And so Claude, and I think honestly, did a great job saying, let's actually make displaying and talking about the cons a feature, a part of the experience that is fundamental. And so Claude just kind of put together this little quiz that you go through, this little survey, and then the other side of that, you end up with some suggested jobs. But if you look at the job cards, they aren't all flowers. I mean, they have real drawbacks, honest assessments of what's good and bad about this. And people really liked that. And over time, we got into this, and Claude got into the specifics. What do you want to see on here? This card changed a couple times through the iterations. And I think the thing to be aware of here, the thing that I think was really interesting, is that I don't think that this loop, by any stretch of the imagination, is a replacement for a team going through this process. But what I think this shows is a preview of how a really AI forward team can move to product market fit faster. So instead of this loop being the only thing that's happening, I think you just augment this loop with humans at almost every stage, and experts in different domains that are a part of this loop, that they are helping to analyze it. But that the actual engine itself could be powered by this type of loop, that essentially the interviews are facilitated at scale through dialogue, for instance, but then the analysis is, a shared responsibility with expert humans and dialogue. And I will say this did so much better than I thought it would. And the outcome looked great. The outcome felt like a real product, and it felt way, way better than just a one sentence prompt that goes and builds some slop product. I really felt like this could be a real product in the world. This is something that with a ton of refinement and a lot of scale can actually produce a lot of very interesting things. And I would go as far to say that product market fit may be something that is given to you in a couple years. It may just be that a loop like this exists that is so turnkey that really getting a piece of software that maps to people's problems almost perfectly is something that may just be given to you, and then everything else that goes on to the business is what really matters. So we will see. But regardless, this was a super interesting experiment. We had an absolute blast running it, and I think 2026 is going to be one of the most transformative years for a product that we've ever experienced. So more than anything, I'm just excited to see where we end up